Hello again, everyone. Verrill Flow Roofing out of Portland, and this video contributing to our frequently asked question mini series here. The differences between and the problems of commercial versus residential might be a little more long drawn, and really what I want to be doing is trying to give thorough explanation. I think anyone who's tuned in has probably just heard the ramblings and be like, this guy just talking, right? I think what we need to do is integrate a little more of the firsthand experience of what we've done to ensure that past, present, or future clients understand what it takes to protect their property from the top down and how we flow the inside out. So commercial roofing has got a lot of different nuances compared to residential, one of which right off the bat is the parties involved. You're not going to find a building engineer, you're not going to find architects, you're not going to find the same type of legal counsel, insurance requirements, the equipment, the logistics, the timeline, the price associated, the trained crews, the manufacturers. It goes on and on. And you're not going to see that in residential the same, where in the commercial space, the client's expectations are higher. They want their project to be the smoothest flowing possible. There's sometimes tenants involved, both residential and active commercial, where lights don't turn off just because roofing activities is happening. So in commercial, you want to reduce the friction. You want it to be as smooth flowing as possible to prevent there being any issues around interruptions for operations. You're providing an experience to make sure that the tenants, for the building owner, the manufacturers, whoever's inside the building, the tenants themselves can continue to flow. And so this could be distribution, it could be an office, this could be a multifamily situation, it could be manufacturing as well. And you want to ensure that the roofing activities has no hindrance on those type of businesses. So I can speak only really from what we've experienced, and I'll start with heavy manufacturing facilities. So in this example, tenant occupied space, tens of thousands of square feet, and the facility specifically being high-end medical manufacturing. So the stakes are a lot higher, and inside that, I guarantee you that building has probably contributed to maybe someone that you know, family member even, that has a hip or joint replacement at the titanium or cobalt level. And so in there are some pretty sensitive pieces of equipment that I was told everything in that building probably over about $100 million worth of equipment, right? And so who are we flow to be considered as a valuable option, especially against some of these nationwide brands that are way heavier funded, way more experienced? Why would Flow be considered in this pool? One, I believe through our manufacturers' relationships. Two, the type of communication that we're able to give the client as well, the value, the cost specifically, the risk mitigation factors that we're taking onto account, the on-site project management, and overall the ability for us to provide and produce a quality outcome experience. And so with that, we were able to talk about what the expectations were from the perspective of you client, the facility manager, the board members, the portfolio managers, the property managers, etc., the ownership as well. This is what they wanted. So we wanted to make sure that we got that documented so we understood this is what success looks like from the client's perspective. Now, how can we reverse engineer that type of experience, right? So obviously, leak-free roof, okay? Obviously, staying on budget, right? Making sure that exactly what the assembly requires, what's specified is exactly what's going to go on the roof, and it's not going to have any increased cost. What are the trade partners associated with this particular building? Are HVAC going to get involved? We had talked with manufacturers in producing a solution that prevented an extra, it was about $50,000 to $90,000 in additional trade associated costs, because the relationship with the manufacturer helped prevent those expenses, because we were able to negotiate curb height detail on some of the penetrations such that we could guarantee there were still going to be warranty clauses that we're going to produce reliable outcomes. I guess the manufacturer is going to stand by the workmanship, going to both stand by the warranty, even though there were exclusions because of the details around the curb heights of some of these RTUs. That may not make sense to most people, but anyone who's in the facility maintenance, commercial flat roof building side of things, sometimes you have HVAC curbs, and there are about a 6 to an 8 inch tolerance, depending on the manufacturer, for minimum requirements around penetration associated roofing details, where they can omit some of those details, but they can also make what's called an allowance. So depending on your relationship with the manufacturer, you can prevent these issues from being an exclusion by having the conversations beforehand to saying, hey, look, we've got these curbs here. The property owners don't want to spend 50 to 100K on this extra unnecessary expense and the downtime of what that means for the facility. In some cases, like this medical one, what are you going to do? You're going to have your engineers inside the building unair conditioned, right? So no, you're not going to have that. You're not going to pay for the temporary facilities for that to come in and make that a reality. You're not going to want the downtime from 2 to 3 plus weeks worth of work, creating the risk of, booting down. And I don't know what that process looks like from an engineering standpoint, at least on the manufacturing side, but you don't want the downtime and the reboot phase to be anything you have to consider. So do the roofs separate from everything that we're doing inside the building, so we don't have to worry about downtime, is one of the biggest things that we talk to our facility maintenance persons about, because we want to make sure the building and the tenants can continue to flow, continue to grow. So biggest concern by far, one of the things that we hear from ownership or board members as well is or property managers is like, hey, let's keep the lights on for this business. It's a part of our active conversations to making sure that we can accommodate and produce a successful outcome for the folks that are making decisions around these commercial properties. So you won't get that on residential. You just won't necessarily have the same type of disturbances, the times, the trades, the total horizon for the total project is going to be 1 week or less on the residential side, where it can be weeks, months, even multi-phase in years for potential commercial. So depending on the scope, depending on everything that's going into for these specified projects, some of the Portland schools went out for bid most recently. They're all prevailing wage, which means they're a race to the bottom. We were putting up bids for them, and we were setting expectations for things like the abatement vendor side of things, the timelines associated with that, and what that means when you have an open roof in some of these cases. So there's a bunch of other considerations that go into making sure that those projects flow smoothly, because you can do them in a seasonal way where, sometimes the schools aren't in session in the summer. So you get a different production process. There's specific details sometimes for night work as well as like weekend work allocations. So depending on the nature of the property or the tenants involved or the building's use, then you have these nuances around what are the different ways that you're going to flow in terms of production process that also have cost implications, because sometimes what if you did have to do a nighttime install, get some floodlights up there and everything's flowing just underneath the stars. So that would be more of like a facilities example. We have done a couple different hotels at this point in the hospitality space, at which the main consideration around the conversations around priorities for ownership, decision makers, and board members is guest comfort level. And with that then comes an extra level of communication required to make sure that both the guests and the staff of the building are comfortable with where they're working at, especially in the case where there's heavy equipment doing crane work around, possibly disposal, there's parking allocations, there's a little bit of disturbance in terms of how things are flowing in the parking lot. Obviously, noise considerations and constraints around hours and work time specifically reduces the total output of what a crew can do, because you're not going 7 to 7, maybe you can only go 8 or 9 to 5 or less. And so what that looks like from a conversation standpoint is really, again, aligning ourselves with what is the board, what are the ownerships, what are the property managers, what are the management on site's priorities for making sure that they don't have to deal with unnecessary complaints, because of the roofer not doing their due diligence or having the experience to make sure that they don't have these issues beforehand. So conversations we're having with board members, decision makers, property managers, property owners, as well as like, again, what are the things that matter most to you? What are the things you've experienced that didn't go right in the past? And or what are the things that you would have changed on the last project you went to? So one of the key differences residential commercial is typically residential. You're going to have a little bit more of a transactional experience, very unlikely, and hopefully not. You're going to have to buy more than one roof on the residential side. Whereas commercial folks that deal with portfolios or multiple properties, you're going to be doing budgeting, making budgetary considerations. If it's HOA, maybe reserve studies, so that way you can have the foresight of what's to come in the future. And so the idea is in that there's likely past experiences that may or may not have went well that we can then learn from to make sure that don't happen again for you on your future projects. So what are the things that matter to the decision makers in terms of the tenancies, the occupied spaces, the businesses involved with the building's use? And so hospitality, I feel like, is probably one of the higher level considerations or accommodating projects, because you are dealing with folks that don't know, that are coming in some cases, that don't know the building's under construction. And so setting expectations around this is what can happen. There can be noise that starts at 9 o'clock. There could be less parking availability because of where materials are being staged or equipment's being used. So hospitality is a great place to make sure you know what the hell's going on in the commercial space, because you're dealing with people that have little to no expectations that a building could be under construction. So you're accommodating for the unknowns and the people that are generally going to be surprised because they're traveling. And so that's where your relationship comes in with management, with the property managers, with the staff, to making sure that you are given good communication on both ends so that you can act quickly in case someone is not comfortable with the construction activities happening on the property. So we had over 30 individuals on a property, and at one point I think it was like closer to 35, producing roofing related activities and trying to reduce the amount of noise, both the load on the staff and the total disturbances to the property for about a 3-week process. And this is an orchestration of sorts that requires over communication at every level, on safety, on total material documentation, the staff involved with the hotel, the management, the guest experience, the active issues, the known issues, the unknown issues, and the developing issues. So that way you can stay on top of mitigating both risk, overexposure, and you want to maximize success for the project. So to say that residential is going to ever compare to that level of orchestration, I think would only happen at a portfolio level that we see sometimes in the property management side of things, but generally it's going to be one property at a time. You're not going to have a property manager say, yeah, give me 20 new roofs and I want it done in a week. So in that way, I think that you get a lot of differences between the commercial side versus the residential, just because of the sheer volume and the expectations involved with all the different moving parts. And so the other big differences are going to be the assemblies involved. And so in the commercial space, typically, if it's done properly, you're going to have specified systems and or desired outcomes through guided solutions, which is a way of saying, like, basically an architect's going to draw up what's existing and what needs to be done to create a successful outcome through specifications on drawings that are approved. And This is where like an architect or an engineer may have errors and omissions because they are designing the system before and after that then the roofers go and install. And this is more what's called bid work in the commercial space, but you could have yourself as a facilities guy, you could have a property manager, you could have just a standard property owner who's trying to get a quality solution, and they may not know what goes into their current roof, right? But they would expect that you have the experience to determine what the best solution is and to do it both on time, on budget, and as smoothly as possible. So on the commercial side, you don't see this as much on the residential side, but a core sample would be the best first step, and multiple core samples on a roof, because you don't want to find yourself ending up with a flat system that requires a taper after the fact. You do a tear off, and you want to make sure that everything is as dry as possible. You don't want any sort of saturation in the ISO. You want to check what your R value is. You want to see what the decking type is. The core sample is on a flat roof the holy grail of requirements to making sure that before production happens, that a property owner and property decision makers understand what goes into their current system. There's conversation around their preferences, their priorities in terms of the project as well. What product, everyone wants to talk about product and price, but there's so many other considerations that determine what go into a smooth flowing, successful project when it comes to commercial, because of all these different factors with the different parties involved, the different trades involved, the tenants, the building use, all these different material types, the decking type, the R values, the pre-existing conditions. What are the timelines? What are the expectations of ownership for how long this system is supposed to last? Project that we're probably only going to have about a 5% shot at getting awarded for down at the University of Oregon. Pretty low in the way that the only way we probably get the award for the project is if the GC pulls off their crew because of excessive demand due to seasonality. So that project has a fully adhered PVC key system, full built up, no tapers built in, R30 plus the taper, full cap metal cladding around the perimeter as well. And then you have scaffolding involved, you have HVAC involved, you got plumbing and electrical. So the orchestration of that project is something that residential people are never going to have to worry about, which you should be excited about, because the moving parts at that level are all of which are out of your control. And there's only a schedule and a light spec to be able to base the successful outcome on. And so you're not going to necessarily have that same level of consideration at all in residential, which should be a little bit of peace of mind for you. But for everyone in the commercial space to do with facilities and occupied spaces that have portfolio or potentially an HOA or multifamily, you have other humans involved. And so then comes the requirement that communication steps up tenfold, because if you have one tenant who didn't realize construction activities were going to start at a certain date and forgets to move their car, something super simple, something that can be avoided with door notices, or if you had neglected to send a follow-up email the Friday before Mondays were going to start, or Sundays before Mondays were going to start, and you didn't have a good cadence in terms of what the communication styles needed to look like prior to a commercial project starting, everything that you prepared for, everything that was set for that Monday start could be hinging on something that is out of your control, where if you had taken the extra steps to go above and beyond a communication to make sure that both tenants or occupied spaces or the building use and or the building management knew that everything was going to start at the specific day, then that's the difference between success and failure in a commercial project, is just the communication alone, right? Setting those expectations. And so you would want to, both automate that type of communication, but you would want to also have what's called an account manager for that, something like that. And so these are components of what we've developed in the commercial space, in the commercial division for the clients in our side of the world, which have chose Flow for a solution for their problem. and or their project, which is providing quality communication at every turn to make sure that we don't leave things up to assumptions, which can get people in a buttload of trouble, like what they say about assumptions, right? Make an ass of you and me. You want to make sure you have dedicated project managers, you want to have your account managers, you want to have proper inspection processes, secondary inspection processes, protocols, checks and balances to make sure things are going to flow properly. Otherwise, leaving your project up to someone who may be coming over from the residential space who wants to dabble in the commercial space but doesn't have the experience puts your property at risk. Your tenants can be set up for failure. Your own outfit, maybe your property manager or portfolio manager, building engineer, you're putting your reputation on the line because you've chosen to save a little money and going with someone who says they have the experience, but they may not have like the total necessary required details or the team involved or the systems and processes necessary to provide yourselves with a smooth flowing project, right? So back to story time. We covered the facility. We went through hospitality, distribution, warehouse, and office. Still just as important for the communication side of things. You have active people working on site. You don't want their daily activities to be inhibited by anything that's happening on the roof or around the roof. And so in a restoration side of things, you have a little bit lighter of a heavy roof related scope. And so you're not going to have as much noise potentially. You're not going to have as much equipment potentially. But depending on the size and the scope of the building and the building's use, you could still have a pretty lengthy time horizon for total construction activities. So, there are scopes out there on particular properties that are multi-year, multi-phase scopes where potentially only one particular part of a property or one particular phase of a development can be accomplished in an entire season. If you can imagine that there may be 50 to 100 plus buildings involved with this particular scope where the phasing of each of the property may need to have multiple years involved with the total scope. They're not very common, but they are out there. So in that case, you will likely need to tackle things from a different perspective on prioritizing and reducing exposure to the property based on the scope. And so you would not do tear off in the winter, for instance, which means you're not going to need your dumpsters, right? There's going to be specific timing on when you're going to have the crane time, the safety setups, the meetings, the procurement process of the commercial project. So based on those details, again, residential is not going to see the depth of what it takes to go and orchestrate a commercial project to align with success, both from the property decision owner's standpoint, but in terms of what Flow defines as success, which is ensuring that parties involved know what next steps look like and why, when, how, and where, so that way everyone's comfortable with the process. So we've developed these systems, these successful processes, because Flow is not always at that level. And I think Flow's still developing a lot of its systems and processes because, in my mind, this is kind of an underdog story. Like Flow now, we're going to our 8th year. We're going to go 10, 20 after that. And in order for us to make it, we can never get complacent. We can never say that we've gotten where we want to be. We have to continue to sharpen our blades. We have to continue to elevate, train, and assume the worst case so we can be over prepared because chance favors the prepared. And so you want to be prepared for worst case weather. You want to be prepared for worst case outcomes for timelines. You want to be prepared for lack of potential. You want to be prepared for even for sickness, both on the actual labor side of things. So the seasonality factor that comes into play. You want to limit the exposure on a property so that way you can dry in things instantly in case weather turns. Okay, you want to have enough labor allocated to be able to accomplish something like that at the turn of a dime, as the old guys say, right? Something on the lines of being prepared for the worst and hoping for the best. And I think in the Northwest we get, for the most part, a pretty good well, in the spring and the fall it's a little bit different. But from what I hear about dudes over in Florida, they have to be prepared for rains to come in that afternoon fairly consistently. Whereas we can see a little further into the future with weather. It gets a little bit dicey in the spring, but for the most part, I've always stuck to the same weather app in terms of how I coach production, in terms of how I prepare clients for what to expect. I've always and only used one weather app. It's Google, because I believe that it's provided consistency in either direction. I believe it's consistently right most times, but if it's wrong, it's generally consistently wrong, or it consistently changes in a way that I can predict future outcomes, that I can have better communication with my clients instead of hopping around on different portfolios. And NOAA is a pretty decent, National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration provides a decent look into the future as well. That's generally pretty accurate, but I know that Google's tying a lot of their data to the best, and in that way, I believe I've been able to create fairly consistent, predictable outcomes in terms of scheduling for what I think the weather looks like. Obviously, can't control the weather, but for the most part, weather being one of the biggest factors that we've had to deal with in terms of problems for any project size, is always considering whether the apps are our Bible to ensuring that we can have a smooth flowing project. So there's some seasonality in the commercial space that you just don't have to deal with in residential, because sometimes you can get in and out in less than a week in residential, whereas in commercial you can have weeks to months in terms of what it takes to complete the scope. So flashing being one of the biggest differentiators. A shingle is installed the same on a single family home as a commercial building, no matter what. The metal roof is as well. Sometimes even the membrane is installed relatively the same. But on the commercial side of things, you're going to have different decking types. You're going to have parapets and details. You can have RTUs involved that you're not going to see in the residential side, that are going to play a bigger factor in the logistics, the timelines, the solutions involved, the flashing approaches, and specified solutions, so that we can then put our prescribed workmanship related solution on that particular detail, which is overcomplicating the way that saying that the approach needs to be simplified for what the details entail on the scope of the roof. So we've got an RFI out there right now for how to work ourselves around this massive 50 plus ton RTU, and what are the specified solutions to help enclosing this roof to wall detail that has a couple inches along this brick siding, that ensures that we can enclose the space without having to disassemble this massive structure. So waiting for architects to get back us on that, as well as having the manufacturers on site to make sure that the architects are prescribing the right solution that we can install. And so ownership in the commercial space doesn't always have to rely on the roofing contractor's expertise in order to trust that they know what the best solution is for their property, if that makes sense. There are other parties involved via the manufacturers and the architects or the engineers that ensure that this is the prescribed solution, so that the roofers follow specs and there's no deviation from that, ensuring that this is the proper solution for that particular detail on that particular building. So yes, there are industry related experience-based solutions for very common details like RTU curves or termination points around specific penetrations or different curbs or anything like that. But in some instances, right, there are nuances for things that you can't get access to, or potentially pre-existing conditions that you need to be prepared for, to making sure that you're not making decisions on site at the time of install, but you have to be preemptive. You have to be prepared for what to expect in these situations when you get to those details on the roof, right? So core samples being one of the best tools, but also relying on the professionals like the architects, the engineers, to be able to specify the right solutions for those particular details helps lighten our load as roofers to making sure that we understand what is going to take to do those solutions properly without having to make decisions on the fly or relying on crew experience and or training. So you work with your manufacturers to get through some of these details. They're an asset to making sure these properties are protected from the top down, mostly because if you're working at a commercial level warranty, they're only going to cover what's specified within their manufacturer's docs, basically. So you have to follow their specs as well, and you get them involved in some of these problems to make sure that they can stand by the warranty. You can give the warranty to the property owners without any issues. So what else? Budget considerations in the commercial space are, that's probably the common denominator both in residential and commercial. It's like everyone wants the best bang for the buck. And I think that you see a lot in the commercial space, conversations around how can we reduce total overhead, right? So there's something called ROI, but there's also called NOI, net operating income. I want to maximize a property owner's NOI, and I want to maximize the ROI as well, while reducing overall overhead. And a lot of that is done, and we talked about this in previous videos, through ongoing, consistent, annual, if not quarterly, potentially, depending on the building's both use type, foot traffic, and or tree cover, depending on where it's at. Preventative maintenance. Preventative maintenance being one of the single biggest factors beyond just quality workmanship and good materials as to what makes a roofing system last. And we have since, even as of the last 6 months, changed a little bit of our perspective around what is a good restoration solution for specific buildings because of what we've seen in and been exposed to in terms of active commercial requests on solutions that are not working, basically. So commercial client calls up, says, hey, Flo, I've got some issues I want you to come take a look at. We show up and go, oh, cool, nice. We've got ourselves a coating that's failing, right? So education for us, data point, new marker that says, okay, well, not all coatings are appropriate for every building, right? So I love coatings for metal roofs. I'm not as big of a fan on coating every single membrane roof and or coating every single mod bit roof, because there can be hidden moisture trapped in the system that can then create a bubble effect that pops that thing open and creates a failure point. And that can happen consistently if you don't go through and identify potential pre-existing issues like leaks. This is a leak, if anyone doesn't already know. Mr. Leak is our little mascot. He's been given a cute face, but on the dog toys, he's kind of more evil because we want those dogs to rip him up, right? No one likes a leak. So that being said, pre-existing conditions, it's important during the inspection process that we do our due diligence, that we create a thorough, as well as we possibly can, document. This is why core samples are so important on flat roofs. That gives us an accurate indication of both our value, insulation, saturation, decking type being one of the next biggest considerations in terms of what is this building's structural components look like, because you're going to install a system differently based on whether it's wood, steel, or concrete. That can drastically change the cost of the system. Are you going to do a fully adhered, basically glue down system, or are you going to need a mechanically attached screwed down system? Is there going to be any considerations on what's better, a rhino bond or a classic mechanically attached system? So What's the seasonality of the building types? How big, and this is going to be a separate video that we'll touch on. Like burns, there are degrees of leak severity, if that makes sense. So not all leaks are the same, and not all leaks are created in the same way. Some are related to product failures, some are relating to workmanship. Some don't show in lighter rains, some only show in heavier rains. And there's a combination and a spectrum across all those different factors that will create a leak to show in different ways in potentially different places for different reasons. And so there are degrees of severity to leaks. I think that I've kind of clung on to different burns as well. So if I'm asking a property person, hey, what's going on here? Like, have you had this issue before? What's the degree of urgency in this particular instance? Oh, well, it's been something we've seen happen over the years and we're finally going to do something about it. Or this is brand new and it's a waterfall and come now, please help God. So it's like, it really depends on the property's history, the property manager or the building engineer, the facility person, what is their power in giving the property its properly prescribed solution. What are the timelines for the property? Is it something they know they're budgeting for? Is it brand new? Is it minimized now and we'll deal with later? Or is it a solution that's on the horizon where replacement's already part of the conversation, the expectations have already been set? There's so many different factors when it comes to leaks that we want to obviously try. Our priority at Flow and how we do things is it's a preserve and protect model. We want to maximize your budget at every possible turn. And we even wrap our trucks with it. We say repair, maintain, restore before we ever have a conversation about replacement. So we've exhausted every option so you know that you can trust the fact that we're trying to save you money at every given turn, because that is the consideration of every decision maker I've ever interacted with on residential or commercial. Any different level of budget, portfolio, HOA, you name it, these board members are making decisions that are to preserve their budgets so they can get the best ROI out of the current property, so they get the best net operating income out of the asset. And I think that's where some residential roofers may go awry, as they see this potentially larger project and they get all googly-eyed over the opportunity instead of investing in the board member, the property owners, the property manager, the facility person's best interest because of their greed. And that's where I think a lot of roofers get their bad name, is that, like, for one, yes, roofs are expensive, but like they will generally try to either hide details around what the true cost could be. And there's a bunch of people out there that say, that there's value in operating through like what's known as like a change order, etc. But a good roofer should try to try to uncover these hidden expenses. And so we're trying to have conversations around worst case scenarios that provide as much education in the decision-making process as possible. Because here's the other thing too, I know Flow goes up against competitors of all sizes. And in our history, and I still think this today, Flow has never sold a roof, which is kind of a head scratcher for some people. It's because we don't sell at Flow. We educate. We try to take the perspective of like, what would I want to know in terms of what I need in order to make a better decision about this property, so that I don't have to spend more than I think I'm going to need, so I can have a better, smoother process during the process, so I can actually sleep good at night, so I can have a better budget for tomorrow by making better decisions today because I got the right information that Flow is providing. So I'll say that, like, I welcome competitors that are private equity backed, because for the most part, I know they're going to implement a commission structure that is aligned with the roofing company's best interest. Whereas when you flow with us, like, our best interest is to maximize your budget by preventing unnecessary expenses so you get the best ROI out of the current system, so you can go and buy more property, so we can have a longer relationship. And this is kind of the one thing that I've always known but don't necessarily enjoy as much with residential, is that it's kind of like a 50-50. It's like, are we going to work together or not? I will give you all the information you need to make a better decision in your journey through making better decisions on your roof for residential. But I know that the relationship in commercial has potentially decades worth of a horizon, where then at that point, I know that I'm going to see it next year, because I'm going to try to get you the best for the current system and try to prevent you from having to spend money on that 6, potentially 7-figure expense, and or at least try to give you a horizon on how to budget for it, so that way you're getting the best ROI out of the current system. You want the best net operating income out of that property, hands down. So when you flow with us, this is how our commercial division is trained, is through the lens of preserve and protect by maximizing the best information through the inspection process possible, so you know exactly what goes into your assembly on your system, so you know exactly the best next steps on how to proceed. And I think we've kind of beat this horse down so much on previous videos, but it's still the most single important factor in overall lifespan for commercial property assets, and the asset being the roof for the property, is preventative maintenance. So there's 2 different sides of the coin. There's deferred maintenance, and then there's preventative maintenance, right? Preventative being that, what are the things that you can do to prevent issues from popping up? That's as good as it's as analogous as taking care of the oil changes in your car. I am going to be consistent with inspections and preventative activities so that I never have to worry about active issues causing more capital expenses or downtime or tenant disturbances or complaints from tenants that are going to make the board happier, the facility guy happier, the overall budget is going to be healthier, because you're being preventative by not waiting to have to react to issues that you could have been on top of beforehand, right? It's pretty simple. Whereas deferred means that you have chose to save now and then act later, which historically will always cost more. So, don't take my word for it. We have studies that have shown this. We have current properties that have shown this. You take care of the thing now. It will allow you to extend the budget of your future decisions, to give you more resources to both expand your property and or take care of other capital expenses before you need to be thinking about the roof, okay? U.S. Air Force study, over 600 million square feet of EDPM roofs, which is a rubber membrane. It's not a mod bit or an asphalt-based product, or it's not a TPO or PVC. It's similar, though, in the way that it's a single-ply membrane. It has a similar welding component to it. We don't do EDPM here at Flow, but it's a great study, and that helps us educate clients around the fact that if you take care of these systems, you will drop your net operating expenses significantly over the lifespan of that roof, in a way that makes it worth preventing issues by being preventative in nature, which it's a fancy way of saying take care of your roof because it takes care of your assets, right? And some of these buildings can have a building envelope that easily will touch 7-8 figures if you're talking about mid-rise to high-rise level properties. So why put the building at risk by being cheap instead of just jumping on it? And we see probably the best decision makers, the best educated decision makers around this particular theme being property managers, HOA people, because they have limited budgets. They don't want to spend more unnecessarily because money is not limited. So they make allocations or capital resources get budgeted in a way where they value taking care of the things that, multiple board members or multiple parties will kind of rally around taking care of things in a preventative nature versus waiting to react. But we meet a ton of people. The people that we generally get calls from are the people that are reactionary, that are waiting for something to happen. And in that way, they spend more because they're going to, one, repair the issue before they have to then jump on a maintenance plan because they've chosen to wait before they have to make that decision, which can add to the issue. It can create more saturation. The problem can grow. Then multiple things can happen. Then you have other trades. You have restoration get involved. You have other like siders. You have drywallers. You have electrical. You have plumbing. So take care of your roofs. They take care of you, right? Other big differences would be the material assemblies and how they're specified, the installs, the specifications that get the warranties taken care of. On the residential side, you're going to see plus 80% probably shingle related, a little bit of metal, a little bit of membrane, depending on the architecture of the roof. But I think things trend a little more flat roof in the commercial space. Barely. There's still steep slope application in the commercial space and everything in between. It really depends on the architecture of the building. The shingle is still installed the same way, but some of the warranties are completely different. The fancy 50-year warranty you see in the residential warranty does not exist in the commercial space. If you're thinking about your residential warranties, that 50 number is a bunch of BS. The 50-year warranty does not exist in the commercial space. Look to the commercial warranty of the shingle manufacturer and you will see the real active lifespan of the product. It prorates after 20 years, which means that yes, it ages and then it goes down in value because after 2 decades, all asphalt products will degrade based on UV resistance. And it's just a model for the manufacturers who have a monopoly on the industry. They want to sell more products. So why would they make a product that lasts forever? It's against their model. If they want to sell more product, why are we going to make something that lasts longer, right? The investors need their money back or whatever the hell. So, in the warranty language of a lot of the commercial products out there, maintenance is common language and making sure that they know you're being a responsible property owner. On the membrane side of things, it's called an NDL warranty. On the metal side of things, it's like a weathertight warranty. There are some NDL shingle related warranties, but your true lifespan is going to be at 30 to 40 years for a shingle in the commercial space. The 50-year is a bunch of bullshit. It's a marketing ploy that one manufacturer jumped on. They all jumped on the bandwagon because it's a monopoly. They all seem to raise their prices at the same time. And because of that, people think they're going to get 50 years out of their roof. Well, they're rolling the dice knowing that home ownership turnover on average is about 10 to 12 years. And so they'll never have to honor that warranty on about a 20-year time cycle, right? Whereas a buy and hold asset in the commercial space, you look at churches, you look at office, these things don't come up for sale all the time. There's some outliers out there, like a Big Pink, that just recently turned over. There's some other assets that have a higher frequency, but in the manufacturer space, right, for a big time distributor manufacturer, their investment horizons probably 20 to 50 years before they see the ROI on that factory. Look at what Tesla's doing with their gigafactories. You think they plan on selling the gigafactory after 5 years? No. So their warranties on the roof are going to be an indication of the intent with the property. They know they're going to honor that warranty in a 20 to 30 year cycle on the membrane side because that property owner plans on operating for 50 to 100 plus years. If it's structured properly, if it's a brand that's been around long enough. So the warranty side of the commercial space, a lot of that fine print is there with the understanding and the hope that your facility manager, your maintenance person, your grounds person, whoever's taking care of the property, is going to also take care of the roof. And if you're not, then you've got a little bit of a hole in your building's security, because you're not taking care of the asset that's taking care of everything on the inside of the property. In some cases, this could be hundreds of units of multifamily. This could be facility production we were talking about, that's on the 9+ figure level in terms of liability, with the manufacturing happening on the inside. It could be goods, it could be services, it could be operators, tenants involved that you're protecting. So it's like, why risk putting all of those people and entities on the line because you're trying to be cheap, or you don't think that things need to be maintained? Everything breaks in life, right? I just sprained my ankle a couple weeks ago. I'm still hobbling around, right? And, was that an actual accident? Yes. Could have I prevented it by doing better ankle strengthening activities in my workout? Probably, but came down pretty hard, so who knows. But that being said, these are just some of the indicators that I think that are worth considering for all the commercial folks out there that deal with multiple properties. It's like, how do I reduce my overhead because my investors or my board members or my property peoples want me to be more efficient? The dollars mean more these days than ever, right? Gas is going 5+. In our lifetime, could be $10 a gallon. You think that operators are going to be able to manage that type of overhead without maximizing every other aspect of their business? You're not going to get that type of ROI out of upgrading your HVAC unit versus just taking care of what you already got, right? So take care of your roofs. They take care of you. They're an asset for your assets. And this is one of the things that at least some of my unofficial mentors kind of push every single day. It's like, how do we provide the best value for people making decisions on these properties? Let's just make sure they take care of the current system that they have. They can prevent small issues from becoming bigger. They can try to ensure that they're getting the best ROI for the current system. They can diagnose issues. They can have budgetary conversations about future intent around the property. And for the most part, I've always said that the best warranty is a warranty you never need. And that starts with getting the install done right in the first place. And so the way that commercial has been able to develop at Flow has been in aligning with the spec, in aligning with what are the best in the industry doing and how it can be done better. What would we want? How would we want to be treated during this process, And so I believe that we've still got a long ways to go. We can always get better. It's like always ongoing, moving goalpost, this pursuit of perfection. But it's allowed us to maintain the underdog mindset that we are never there. We don't want to get complacent. We want to give our clients the very best that they deserve. These roofs are not cheap, right? There's a fixed cost in the material associated, the labor disposal associated with getting these roofs done successfully. We want to try to be lean and mean in the way that we can try to be the best ROI for anyone who chooses to go with the Flow. And so in that way, it's kind of the way that we do things around here. So I thought I'd give a little bit of Sunday ramble. Got to work on some work orders, do a little bit of trailer delivery, got to stretch and maybe get a little bit of sauna time in. We finally got ourselves at least a partial week of good weather this spring. It's almost mid-March, and we've been kind of hunkered down with all this precipitation. I think there's 3 flat roofs that were supposed to get going here, and one's larger than it's taken now 2 weeks because there's been shit weather so far, and other people's emergency situations are coming up that we want to try to prioritize, but we're like, hey, the weather is, we only have so much capacity, and I think that's a real honest conversation I like to have with commercial people. Is like, we will give you the best experience we possibly can, and I do not want to assume that we can just spin on a dime. And I think that's part of the conversation in commercial that's worth having. It's like, there's seasonality, some of these scopes, where you can't operate anytime outside of like March to September, even May to September, because April can go crazy. And so having those honest conversations around, this is what we can do for you in terms of scheduling. This is how we'll provide to you the smoothest flowing process. And, that you can prepare all day. You can prepare for a year or more, and still the weather's not going to cooperate. You're going to have to go with the flow, and part of that is kind of the frustrating part of the industry. But at this point, I call it liquid sunshine. I love commercial roofing. I love the clients that we deal with. I love everyone's professionalism, both at the facility level, the board level, the ownership level, the engineers and the architects involved. It's allowed us to pursue roofing in a way that I believe allows us to be a contender against some of these brands that have been around for 100 years, been around or are nationwide. And that's not to say we're perfect. That's not to say that we're the best option, but it's certainly allowed us to raise our ships, because I know what these other guys are playing with, and I know what the expectations are. There's some things that we haven't been exposed to, and I don't even give it time and consideration. We'll never be your green roof contractor, period. I don't like EDPM either, because I don't know it, right? And actually, this is a whole nother video, but eventually we'll talk about how everyone seems to think that flow should get into some of these other trades. There's one company that I look to that I believe is doing roofing at the level that I eventually want to get to, and they have in-house HVAC. And so that, for my commercial clients, I see as a very valuable vertical that I want to look into. But you have to take things one step at a time. That's for sure. You bite off more than you can chew. You get distracted. Things fall through the cracks. You don't want that. So that's kind of my ramble here on a Sunday, March 15th. You guys got any questions, feel free to shoot them out. And if you made it through this, kudos, very shocked. And we'll catch you on the next one. Ciao.